Hello and welcome to the Fundamentals of Lute Playing. My name is Laudon Schuett, and today we are talking about diapasons. Now, diapasons are just a fancy word for those strings that, those bass strings that are below your standard 6 courses. Okay, so if you've got a 7-course lute, an 8-course lute, a 9-course lute, a 10-course lute, this video might be very, very helpful for you. Now, if you've got a 6-course lute, but you just want to maybe you're thinking about getting another instrument or something like that, you may want to watch the video to see what you're in for. This has been a highly requested video, and I think we're on like episode 55. Why are we waiting this long to get to diapasons? Honestly, part of it is just because I don't have a really good instrument with diapasons. This is a 10-course student lute that got me through a good chunk of grad school. It's not great. It's not my favorite thing to play. It's not my favorite thing to set up. I spent the weekend sort of restringing it, doing most of the frets. I didn't need to do all the frets. And then I sort of got it set up so it's in decent shape. Right now I have it set up as a 9-course. Why? Basically, I went through my bag of strings and didn't have a low C and didn't want to pay the $60 or whatever for one of them. But 9 courses were a common size for a lute, so everything I talk about today can apply to 7, 8, 9, 10. And I will be the first person to admit that for about 10 years, I've really focused on 6-course repertoire. And I think part of that comes from the fact that when I went to grad school to study lute, my intention, honestly, what I was in love with was Renaissance music. I had been listening to Baltimore Consort. I'd been listening to lute solos, obviously, lute songs. I'd been listening to the treble ground repertoire, broken consort music, just regular consort music, which is like all viols playing together and things like that. All of the same instrument is consort. Should do an episode talking about consort music at some point. But that's what I kind of came to school with a passion for. And then everybody told me, oh, you've got to get a theorbo. Oh, you've got to play continuo. Oh, you've got to do all this Baroque stuff. And I don't dislike Baroque music. I think it's really lovely to listen to, and it's ironic because I've even like written an opera and I'm hoping to get it workshopped next year. I'm working that out. So it's not that I dislike opera or that I dislike continuo. I played theorbo for years. I played continuo on this instrument. I can play continuo on my 6-course. It's just not the music that like lights my brain up. I really love 6-course repertoire. I really love Albert de Riep. I really love Capirola. I really love Spinacino and Dalza and John Johnson and things like that. But I know that many of you have instruments that have 7, 8, 9, or 10 courses, and I wanted to talk about what I would do, because I have in the back of my mind, I've been, thinking the last few years, I'm like, oh, I've been playing 6-course for so long. It'd be really nice to get a 7-course. It'd be really nice to get an 8-course. What if I got a really nice 10-course? Because there is some 10-course repertoire that I absolutely adore. I love the air de cour repertoire, which is essentially the French lute song repertoire of the late 16th and early 17th century. I absolutely adore Nicolas Vallet. I love Ballard. Some of the late Daniel Batchelor music is stunning. Francisque, things like that. Great music. I just haven't wanted to fork over the eight grand for a really nice 10-course for that repertoire yet. But I think at some point it may happen. And I was thinking to myself, well, what did I do wrong the first time I approached playing diapasons, and how would I do things differently? And I think the first thing I would say to all of you, especially though, this is especially important to those of you who are either coming to the lute from a guitar background, or you're coming from maybe a 10-course lute or 9-course lute or 7-course lute, whatever, from a 6-course lute. And I think the mentality sometimes is that we think of the top 6 strings or 6 courses as being sort of the normal stuff. So I play this. And then every once in a while I have to bop down to hit the low stuff. Oh, and just so you all know, I've got my 9-course essentially tuned D, E, F. And it's been an absolute bear to keep in tune. I mean, I had a peg or two go loose yesterday. This is actually the second time I've recorded this video. And I just was having pegs popping out yesterday, and it was just going out of tune. And I had to get some peg dope and play around with some chalk and other things. For some things were stuck, some things were loose. So the instrument may go a little out of tune during this lesson. Again, this is not my favorite lute to play. But I thought to myself, well, what would I do differently? How would I approach this? And the first thing is really mental, which is to not think of it as normal lute plus bass notes and randomly going down, but to really think of like the whole instrument as a thing that I play, to really explore everything that it has to offer. And so I'm going to give you sort of a series of steps that I think is exactly what I would do coming back. And the first thing I will say is the right hand position. I'm not saying that you can't play like a 9 or 10 course lute. You could certainly play a 7 or 8 course lute with thumb under. There are definitely people who play 10 course lutes with thumb under, and if it feels good, if it works for you, keep doing it. I find that by the time I get down here, my thumb is just, the angle is, especially if I'm horizontal. I've got it tilted up, I can kind of get away with it, but I really don't like bringing that thumb back. And this is, generally speaking, even though I don't like to simplify things that much, this is generally when you get to 10 course, 9 course repertoire, people are talking about doing thumb out a lot more. And so I find it to be a lot easier. One of the other things, to just a general tip, is if you're used to playing a smaller instrument, or 6 course or something like that, or 7 course, and you're used to playing over the rows. I mean, my 6 course is very bright, so I tend to be a fair bit over the rows. The problem when we get down into these basses is the closer you get to the middle of the string, the floppier it gets. It's a little bit, if you think about it, it's just like a tightrope, right? You get into it's going to be tightest near where it's tied. So I do recommend being a bit behind the rows. Now you'll see Baroque lute players will even be right up against the bridge and things like that. I don't see those descriptions in late Renaissance music. It's more behind the rows, so slightly different than our Baroque friends. And so the first thing I'm going to recommend is that we think of all of the sort of potential bass notes as being a group. So instead of thinking 6 courses plus the diapasons, what I would maybe encourage you to do is think, okay, I've got index, middle, and ring sort of assigned to these top strings. They're just going to rest there. And my thumb is going to manage everything. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4. And the sort of now, of course, the thumb can go higher. We can get situations where we're playing little thirds, but maybe about 95% of the time, our thumb is going to be really focused on doing this lower stuff. And of course, you'll have to decide, are you going to continue to use, especially if you're playing like a 9 or 10 course lute, are you going to continue to use P and I alternation? Or will you start to use M and I alternation? And if you look at the music of Valet, he really starts to emphasize that M and I alternation. He's got a couple of pieces that are very, very well fingered, and it's clear that M and I is huge at that point. That wasn't universal, though. So if you want to continue using P and I alternation in thumb out position, that's totally fine. Just know that your thumb is going to have to do more jumping. So the first thing I would have you do is we're going to start on the lowest course, whatever that is for you. I've got a 9 course, you may have an 8, you could get a 10 course. And as you may know, watching my previous videos on my little 6 course, I am almost never playing a rest stroke with the thumb. That changes with the diapasons. So if you've got 7, 8, 9, 10 course lute, 7, it just depends on the instrument, the angle of my hand, but I really start to use rest stroke a lot more with the thumb as these basses are added. And not only does I think it produce a better sound on these big thick strings, but it's going to give us a point of reference. Now, if you don't know what a thumb rest stroke is, all that means is that I'm going to play my D, my ninth course here, with my thumb. I'm going to pass through both strings in the chorus and rest on the next course. So, like this. So my first exercise for you would be simply to spend some time getting used to this feeling of doing rest strokes with the thumb. Now, if you're a classical guitarist and you do rest strokes all the time, or have done rest strokes all the time, this will probably be very, very easy for you, and maybe you'll be a little frustrated. You'll be like, well, I've been working really hard on my thumb free strokes, now I got to throw my rest strokes back in. Yeah. For those who haven't done rest strokes with the thumb, one of the tricks is to not use too much thumb, to just use a tiny, tiny little bit on the side there and to cut through. If you try to put too much of the thumb on there, it gets stuck. So just a little bit of thumb, just enough, and we go through and we rest. And I do think if I could go back in time, I'd spend a couple of days without music in front of me, just sitting and getting used to my instrument. Now, when you get to the top here, what we're going to do is we're going to start coming back, and you're going to notice something interesting. And I'll explain it in just a second. So when I pluck a course and I'm going back down to a previous course, I'm going to prepare. And all this means is I'm going to do a rest stroke, and we will talk about there are times when we don't want to do a rest stroke with the thumb. And the most obvious one is, for example, if I'm playing the melody and there's a melody note that's on the course above the bass string you're about to play. So for example, I'm about to play an F here. If I had a melody note and I was playing my A course, then a rest stroke would silence that A, and we may not want that. So that would be a moment where we would actually use free stroke. And we'd leave it sort of ringing and not interfering. So just to be clear, we're not always going to use rest stroke. It's just going to be about 95% of the time whenever it is possible. I think is really helpful with these larger instruments. So I'm going to play the F course with a rest stroke, and then as I play this rest stroke, I bounce back and land on the course behind it, the C. And this is a very quick motion, and what I'm doing is it's almost like a little snake bite. I see students often, they'll do this and they'll kind of pluck and then they'll go very slowly to the thing. But what we want to build in is this sort of twitch reaction so that you're going like this. And of course, look at your hand as you're doing this, especially the first few days. Really see what you're doing. So I'm hopping back. There's the next one. Now I'm on G. And you'll notice I'm spending a little time resting before plucking. And then we're going to do it again. So those two things, the rest stroke and then the preparation. Now obviously when we do a rest stroke and we're just going down to the next course, that's also preparation, so that's sort of built in. So you could almost say, other than the fact that the rest stroke has a certain sound to it that I think is very nice for these low strings, really the rest stroke is also just another form of preparation. Why is preparation good? Because we've always got a reference point. The thumb is on a string. In fact, if I had to give like one thing that I would do very differently than the first time that I was learning theorbo and I was playing on 10 courses, I would spend a lot more time making sure that my thumb is always on a string. If it's in the air, it is so easy to get lost. But if I know, for example, that my thumb is on the D course and I need to get to, let's say, G, there we go, right? And I'm on my G and I need to get to D, and let's say I'm on my D and I need to get to F. There we go. So I can use that as a reference, which brings me to my next little exercise for you guys, which is just skipping. So what you're going to do is you're going to play your lowest course, and it's still going to be a rest stroke, but then you're going to bounce off. So I do a rest stroke, and then I bounce off the next course, and then I play the F next. So I'm going D, F. So I'm skipping the E. Now the reason I'm not doing a free stroke is this tends to be quite a weak sound. So we still need to do the rest stroke, and I'll try to break this down for you. So rest stroke, bounce. You hit that E, and then you bounce off of it. So now I'm just going D, D, F, C. And I think that exercise is really nice to start building some familiarity. And then of course you can go E, G, F. And start building this, and of course you can close your eyes after you start getting more comfortable with it. You just close your eyes and go, okay, I need to go from D, because obviously if you could memorize your music, but most lute players end up reading, so you're not going to necessarily be looking at your thumb. And I think the thing that makes most people nervous with diapasons is hitting the right one, right? And people get a little bit scared. So building that roadmap in your mind, but there's absolutely no shame, especially in the beginning. This is exactly what I would do, is to look, because what we're trying to avoid is making mistakes. We really, even if you have to go very, very slowly, just to make sure you get it right. I think that's very important in the beginning. Then the next step I would take is do octaves, because this is really common in the music. You'll play, for example, a D and then a D, right? E, E, F, F. So F, F. So all you do is you just get used to the distance between playing the D. This is the D that's on your 5th course, 2nd fret. And again, that thumb is preparing. It's going down. And then we do the E. And do F. And just because, again, I don't like to treat these as different, I'd do the G. That G is just a little bit funky. There we go. For now. And then I would even do... I'd even do, for example, you could do something like C. Just again, so that you don't have this sense of like the 6 courses in the diapasons, but we're just trying to bridge that gap. So you do the octaves, and then I do chords. I do a D minor chord, or I do D major. And I will say, this is making me think of something. I often hear players automatically play diapasons loud. And I do think, even though you're doing rest stroke, it's very, very funny. I'll hear somebody playing some very delicate moment in divisé or something like that. And then they'll go boom. And I'm just like, wait a minute, that's a resolution chord. What are you doing? Like, I mean, I know it's cool to have that really loud bass note, but it's also good to start, to get a big firm sound, but also something softer and more delicate. So working on your full dynamic range, getting big sounds, mess with slightly different chord shapes. You know, you could do your nasty D shape. And then maybe do your F chord next. Do a G. And of course do the minors and majors, right? Just a first inversion C chord. So all I'm doing is I'm playing these, you know, so I have my E, E, C, G, first inversion C major. But what I'm really practicing is chord, bass note, chord, bass note, chord, bass note, chord, bass note. And I'm doing everything super fast right now. But, you know, take your time. You may sit there for a day and work on just this. And if you're having trouble with it, start by just working on the preparation. So don't even pluck the bass note. Just going like this. And then I think the next step is you play a chord and you move to a different bass note, a bass note of your choosing. So I'm playing an F chord and I'm going to choose to hit an E now. And then let's say, this brings up another topic. So, because let's say, for example, I have a bass note line that's something like D, and then I play. Now, something interesting happens. I just played an E, and then an F, and they're both ringing out at the same time, which is not necessarily an attractive sound. So one of the other things that you'll want to start working on, especially when you get into the music, is how to clean up your basses a little bit. And the general rule, and this comes from some early 17th sources, is, excuse me, what you want to do is basically silence those bass notes that don't sound good against the harmony or against the bass. So if I have, for example, a first inversion D minor chord, and I go D minor, D, E, F, I'm going to want to silence that E. Now, the seconds, fourths, and sevenths are generally going to sound dissonant. You can sometimes get away with a seventh depending on how the chord is organized, but I would allow, obviously D and F are part of a D minor chord, so allowing those to ring out is totally fine. So I'm just cutting off the E, and the way I'm doing that is just like your other preparation. So I'm playing E, then I'm playing F, and bopping the thumb back to the E. And I think that's a really great technique. And sometimes you have to do it way after the fact. So if I go D, E, F, G, you may have to even silence a couple of strings. You could bring your thumb back and silence D, E, and F, and just allow the G to ring out. There's all sorts of tricks, and I may need to do a future video on just cleaning basses. Not something you really have to worry about a ton with a 6-course lute. Some things that help with the sort of bass noise. The type of string that you're using on your instrument. If you are using a wound string, meaning if you look at your bass strings and they have metal wound around them, those type of strings tend to just keep ringing. And you may want to consider an unwound bass string. So right now I've got Aquila Reds on here from the Aquila Corde company in Italy, and these are wonderful because they don't ring out too long. I'm not super worried about a whole lot of mush. And then the other thing to keep in mind is, you know, these instruments were played in resonant spaces. They were played in what we would kind of call castles or halls with wood and stone. And there is just a level of like reverb and resonance that occurs on the lute, where with modern classical guitar, there's this obsession with cleaning the basses and making sure, I want to make sure that note doesn't ring into that chord. It sounds so bad. The lute, in some ways, especially as we're adding courses, and you'll see in the 17th century when we start looking at transitional tunings and which are essentially like lute versions of open tunings on the guitar, the whole goal is to build up this resonance, right? Where it sometimes becomes an issue is, let's say I've got an imitation, right? So I'm going D, E, F, and then I go. That has a very different quality than all on the same course. Now I say that, and then I go, it doesn't actually bother me that much. So you can pick and choose. You can go through, clean up what you'd like to clean up. I hear a lot of variation among players in terms of how much cleaning they decide to do. The only thing I would caution you against is doing too much. I actually think one of the beautiful characteristics of the lute is that resonance. Okay, so what you've done is you've done your octaves. You've started to play around with chords. Play your chords, do all of that. What can you do next? I mean, you can start getting used to some fretted notes. So for example, finding that F sharp. I mean, if there were one fretted note to learn, it's this F sharp. So if you got your F course, putting that first finger down on the first fret and doing that, a very common shape is, things like this. You get some nice, interesting voices when you fret. One of the reasons I don't like this lute is it's got some buzzes. You can get some new chord shapes if you can get comfortable. And repertoire that gets low like that, Valet sometimes does. Daniel Batchelor, that one fantasy he wrote, has some low fretted things. So that may be a thing you want to get used to. If you're a continuo player, it's great to go grab like an opera or some cantatas or something like that, and just sit down, and anything that can go down the octave, play down the octave. So if you see a D and it's here, you sit there and you go, ah. And I would just play the bass line at first. And then, instead of having, I know I had you guys practice this thing where you're playing a chord and then you're jumping down. But I think the next step is to just think of everything as a whole chord. So for example, D minor, right? Or F, you could do it this way. But I'm not thinking bass note, chord, right? I'm thinking this whole chord is one thing. I've got my C in inversion, or I could do E minor, do something like that. Just trying to get a nice tone out of this lute. It's always a challenge. And then sit down with a solo piece. You put a piece in front of you, and like I said, Valet, Ballard. And the one piece of advice I'd actually give in this area is the mistake I made was I thought I would dip my toe into the water. So when I got my 10 course, I sat down and I was playing pieces that were mostly like the top 6 courses, and then every once in a while have like one low bass. I would actually, as scary as it is, I would advise you to pick a piece that just has a ton of diapasons being played. Just a ton. And then if you've seen my previous videos on how to practice, you'll know there's a technique called chaining, and you just go very, very slowly. And so let's say we have a piece and it's something like, let's see, we'll just start with a D minor, and let's say the opening is, so you play this first chord, and you get used to just finding that first bass note. So we go, and let's say the next thing is something like, and there we go. And I know that F's going a little out of tune, but that peg popped out on me right before this video. So I think we're going to leave it. We're just going to deal with it. So please bear with me. So here again, so I went D minor, and you just get really comfortable with this. And you'll see my thumb is still prepping. And I should say, if you do a slow roll, you may find that your preparation is a little slower. It's not that snake bite. And that's just because if you're doing a slow roll on a chord, it's really hard to do a fast movement right after it. So don't feel bad if you're playing this kind of luxurious roll and your preparation is slower than it normally is when you were doing things like this. You take that, you get really comfortable with this, and then you'll notice the thumb has to make its way all the way up to that F. And so you're going to practice just getting that chord ready. Now you could play that with the fingers, but I find that the sound is better sometimes if we bring the thumb up. So working on that is a good idea. So we play the chord, bass note, thumb comes up, play this next chord, I prep the F. And when we play the F, again, this doesn't have a slow roll, so I can do a quick preparation. And then we go, oh yeah, that's out of tune. Fun. Maybe I will. There we go. Okay. Stay. So we play this F. And we just work our way very, very slowly. And that will start to build your confidence, especially if you have lots of those. So, a piece with something like, F, lots of basses in there. Not, tons of stuff up here and then one F at the end. I don't think that's going to help you out. Diving into a piece that has a ton of bass notes where you're just right from the get-go, you're going, and you're just, it's built into the music. Repertoire like Robert Ballard, Niccolo Valle, the air de cour repertoire is constantly using basses, so you can look at that repertoire. It's stunning music. Great places to find lots of Diapason use. Francisque, excellent stuff. I would just dive in. If you've got a 10-course lute or a 9-course or an 8-course or a 7-course lute, find pieces that really use those basses and dive into it. So overall, I think the two, just to recap, in general, there are always exceptions, and everybody has to kind of work this out on their own. I've certainly seen players go against this, but in general, thumb out, especially for 9 and 10-course instruments. Behind the rows is nice. Using rest stroke whenever possible. And then preparation. And I think those things all combined, just as an example, like I haven't played a 9-course, 10-course lute in like for any real amount of time in years. And over the weekend while I was tuning and setting this up, I just started thinking about these things. And already I feel like more confident than I did ages ago, where I was always sort of, that thumb was floating around and I had to find the basses and all of that. Having that reference point, keeping the thumb on the strings, using rest stroke, using preparation wherever possible. And again, if you can't use rest stroke, for whatever particular reason, let's say again I have something like, here I've got my melody, and if I did a rest stroke, that would cut off the melody, right? And that's no good. But I'm still going to prepare. I'm still going to put that thumb on the next string. Skipping, make sure we still do the rest stroke, but we hop over. We kind of pop off the next chorus. And then I think the final thing I would say is, don't be afraid to like memorize a little spot while you're working on it and look. And then, you could test that out. You could go, okay, now I'm not going to look. And there we go, right? I was a little nervous on that last one, but I got it. And it shows that preparation really starts to work. You start to teach the hand and your brain, more importantly, the distances. So you've got the two reference points where your pinky is on the soundboard and your thumb where it's on there. If any of you have any questions or comments, some of you may be quite experienced on an instrument with diapasons. Throw in a comment, throw in a question. I may do a future video that dives a little bit more into certain things like silencing certain bass notes. I think I'm at a point in my life where if I had the money, I would totally buy a really nice 10-course lute and I'd start making recordings of it. But this student lute is just not good enough. It drives me nuts. So I don't want anybody to think that I have something against. I play a lot of 6-course lutes, and I don't want everyone to think like, oh, Laudon, he's only a 6-course lute player. He doesn't like the other repertoire. It's not true. I just poor, and don't have $8,000 to spend on a 10-course. Someday, I hope to. Any questions or comments, please put them below. Any recommendations or requests for future videos, toss them in the comment section. If you're enjoying the channel, the best way you can help support me is by subscribing. I also have my Patreon link in the description, and that's another way you can support. Again, I've created, you can become a free member of my Patreon and join. I've made a little community message board on my Patreon so people can share videos and communicate with each other and share their stories of practicing. And it's been really fun seeing that. And I think it's nice because it's a little bit less out in the wild like on YouTube. Have a wonderful week. I'll probably get the next division episode up in a couple weeks. Happy practicing, happy luting. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.